Hi, I'm Chet Faliszek, and Aaron Leiby will be joining us in a few minutes. The name of our talk is Opportunities in Virtual Reality. Okay, so at Valve, well, first of all, me and Aaron are both developers at Valve, where we work in virtual reality. But we also spend a lot of time talking to other developers, and one of the things we do is we bring in people from the outside to come into this room, this strange-looking room, and see a demo. Afterwards, we chat. And we always do it afterwards because you have to see the demo first to really understand what the chat's about. Today, we can't give everybody a demo, but instead, we'll just have a little talk to set some context, and then both of us will be up here for the chat after. So the first question we always get asked is, does Valve/Steam care about VR? Well, hopefully, us being here gives you a little hint that yes, we do. We are both really excited about the projects we're working on, and we also are excited enough that we spend a lot of time going out, like I said, and talking to other developers. So why are we excited? If you've been around for a while, you know there's been a lot of false starts with VR. Since the 80s, there's been a lot of attempts at the VR, but it really hasn't come together. But something changed last year. When we talk about VR now, we're not talking about the current headsets. We're talking about the headsets that are going to be coming in the near future. Because we're talking about the VR headsets that can deliver the element we think is needed, and that's presence. Now, presence is different from immersion. You often feel immersion now where the scene's all around you. You kind of can get a little bit of feeling of almost being there, but true presence is the feeling of completely being in the scene. The problem is the presence is really impossible to explain. That's why we do the demo first in our regular chats. Because until you see presence, you just can't have that bit flip of understanding what it is. And if I try to come across and if I try to describe presence, I'm going to fail. And a lot of things come together to give you presence, and I'm not going to explain that in a few slides either. Michael Abrash gave a really good talk about it. You can look it up. So he's really smart. I'm not as smart as Michael Abrash. I'm not going to be able to do it in a few slides. In his talk, this is a punchline to a joke. My talk, I have pictures of my cat. Okay? Let me give you a personal anecdote about presence. I've worked at Valve for 10 years. For the past 6 months, I've been working in virtual reality. I've been talking to her about my wife, explaining to her what I'm working on, why I'm so excited. Last month, she finally came in and saw the demo. In the first room of the demo, she saw this room. It's walls, floors, ceiling made up of a web page. There's a little red cube moving around in it, making a noise. It's not relatable. There's nothing in the world that this is like. 5 seconds into this room, she just started laughing. She just couldn't stop laughing, and then finally stops and blurts out, "I didn't get it before, it's just real." She wasn't seeing a picture or seeing the walls. She was in that room. She was in that virtual room, right? And that's what presence does to you. Oh, hang on. That's Krieg. What the heck? Sorry. There. Oh, there's my picture of my cat again. Oh, I guess there's no way to. All right. But one of the problems after Michael's talk was that everyone started using presence, even people who hadn't experienced presence. So while we need a new word, we don't have one yet. So for now, let's just stick with presence. So what does presence mean to you as a developer? It means you can transport people to places that they've never been. It'll be as real as us sitting here. If you put that robot next to you, as you're saying, is like, right, there's a robot above you, and you have to look back. You have to step back and crane and look up at it. Right? And that ability to take someone somewhere is going to change the industry. And presence is going to let you do more than just take people places. For instance, personal space, which doesn't really mean much in games now, right? You're an avatar on the screen, you're bunny hopping, you're interpenetrating with other players. You don't really notice it. But now it's different, right? Now we have this little experiment we call chat heads. And all it is a really simple head, but it reflects all the movements of the wearer of the HMD. So it seems lifelike. So when someone puts it on there, and the second person picks up their HMD, and they're at 0 point, and the other person hasn't moved away, they're interpenetrating them. It's really personal. It's intimate. It's really uncomfortable. But that's a cool thing. That's something that you can use and work with in what you're doing in VR. I mean, the ability to express empathy in an art form has never been higher than it is with presence. And to achieve presence, there's a bunch of technical stuff that the hardware has to do. But for you, there's one really important thing. When we did our VR Jam in Boston, the HMD we brought out, you had to hit 95 frames per second in both eyes, right? So that's hard. You have to work at that. You have to start at trying that. And not just that, but there's also a bunch of new things you're going to have to learn design-wise to deal with this. And there's one other element that we think, or that we know is going to be needed, and that's a device capable of heavy-duty 3D rendering, your PC. So who do you know right now who creates high-end 3D generated graphics running in real time at frame rate on the PC? Game developers. And the cool thing right now is, with a limited number of HMDs starting, and a lot of the big guys waiting on the sidelines, it's a perfect time for you, indie developers, to jump in. To do that, at Steam, we started working on some things to help. We created Steam VR, which is a future-compatible API enabling developers to write their games once, and it'll work with new hardware as it becomes available. It also ensures compatibility with Steam, so you get a bunch of other additional features like chat, achievements, in-game overlay, all the things you're used to from Steam. If you're working in Unity, we have a plugin that just drops right in and works. We're also working with other major engine developers to spread that kind of easy-to-use support. With that, if you haven't published on Steam, you might not know some of the other features that will help you out. So let me hit on 3 big ones, and we'll get back to VR. So one of them is beta testing. You can do public or private beta tests. No one needs to know you're beta testing. And you can give that 1,000 keys out. You can give out 1 key to your mom. It's up to you how you want to do it. Build distribution. Obviously, when you're selling your game, we're going to distribute it for you. But you can also use that before you release. So if you have a distributed team around the country, you can make a build. Not everybody has to sync to the same tree. Not everybody has to be in the same check-in going on, right? Just one person builds it, everyone else gets to play it. For bug reporting, we have a bunch of tools so you get real-time bug reports, and you can triage based on the number of unique users. We jokingly call the forums the canary in the coal mine approach. That's a bad way to go after bug reporting. You want to be able to find those bugs before they report them. Okay, so that's all great. We're excited about VR and trying to help developers. You're excited about VR, creating experiences now, or you're going to be creating experiences in the future. So now what? On our side, we've demoed to thousands of developers, worked with hundreds more, including having them bring their builds into Valve and work on trying their VR experiences in our room-scale VR. In my office, I have 2 empty desks, and we fill those with visiting developers who have complete access to our resources to develop and test their games. When I left Thursday night, the Control VR guys, it's one of the guys there, had taken over my office, and they were experimenting and trying out their stuff in our room-scale VR. And then about that future, while current shipping HMDs cannot create presence, they do have an important piece of the puzzle, and that's positional tracking. So if you've created something already with rotational, which is the DK1, go back. You're not ready to ship yet. And locking the player into position is not going to help. It's just going to make them sick. And with that, one of the great things that Presence does that you'll see in future headsets, it helps with motion sickness. But that means you as a developer, it's up to you not to get people sick. And when you think of your new ideas in VR, don't limit yourself to just think about games. Try small experiences, big experiences. We'll get the ports, the games where people are running around with guns, but we can do more than that. And don't just think entertainment, think art, education, architecture, design, and more. And remember, VR is physical. You can be able to do things in VR that you can't do in any other forms. And so what will people want to do in an experience in VR? We don't really know at this point. But we are willing to go down different paths with you. So I was chatting with Aaron from Manello Design. He's making a game called Eden River, where you float down a river. And when he's ready to release it, we'll put it up on Steam and see how it does. He'll learn something, we'll learn something. But we're willing to experiment like that. So don't think just because we haven't done something before, we're not willing to do it now. We're all in this together. And so we all just want to help each other out. We're learning what works and doesn't work. This picture is actually from, we had visited Cloudhead Games yesterday, and the restaurant we ate at had goats on the roof. But they had this idea of snapping your view by 27 degrees. That sounds horrible, except they were right. It actually works really, really well. So you don't know everything yet. So talk to them when they're up here. And so talk with them when they're up here. Talk to each other. Help communicate. And if you want to come see our demo and you're not going to release on Steam, don't worry. Come on up. This isn't about Steam. This is about making sure VR succeeds this time. So we'll show you our demo. You can show us your demo. Don't worry about that. And if Aaron's going to come up and join me. Are you mic'd up? Not yet. to answer any of your questions, because we just want to give, like I said, a little context here. But if you don't get a hold of us or get to ask your question, we'll be around all of today. Feel free to grab us, or you can just send us an email. Yeah. Yeah, I went too fast. Oh, you have that. So again, that idea was just to kind of set the context for the discussion we normally have after someone has seen the demo. We don't really ever like to talk to the people before they see the demo because it's different once you've experienced presence. We obviously can't do that here, but we have microphone up. Is the microphone working? Or, all right. Can a game be so scary in VR that it can kill somebody? One of the things we talk about is developers will now have a responsibility to behave themselves. There are cheap things you can do that really make people jump, right? And again, there's a reason why movie makers are looking at this, right? We've demoed to filmmakers, storytellers, the ability to take people to a different place and have them experience something that isn't just like, right now we have things like, oh, hey, there's a new pixel shader out. That looks better. That's great. But it doesn't affect people the way you do here, right? You have a physical reaction. We call it the lizard brain, which your lizard brain's either super smart or super stupid, depending on that moment, where you're like, I can't walk off this ledge. Good job, lizard brain. You've kept me alive this long. I should keep believing you. And then it's like, oh, no, I'm going to go do this. Why are you believing that that's real? That's not real. Like, there's a fight there. And so people need to be responsible about that. And I think you're going to see some stuff be things that people don't want to play because it just doesn't do that. Besides getting people sick, it's that there's emotions you can bring out of people that they may not want.
The thing I think keep saying on this is that in VR it's so much easier to scare people that it's almost not interesting. Like it's trivial. So it's almost more work to not scare people. So try to focus on that.
Come into the light. Yep. Well, we've been open with everybody. To be clear, when you come in and see our demo, you don't sign an NDA. You can tell anybody you went to see it, whatever you saw. That we're not interested in that. We're interested in seeing VR succeeding, and that still exists today, right? They're developers as well of VR, and they're succeeding. Essentially, we wanted them to succeed, and they succeeded. So that's a good thing for VR. And we just want to make sure that VR is open and available to everybody, and that we can just have, like you said, one platform that everyone can target.
Yeah, we have some early tech with that. It's pretty expensive, but it's pretty interesting and pretty compelling. So we think that's going to be a big part of the experience going forward. We have some HRTF. I forget what they're called, models for the headphones. So there's a bunch of those out there. So if you can get the data for that, then you can generate better audio.
Oh, nice! Hello. I have the microphone.
It's not on though, is it? I just have to speak big. It is.
Sucker.
Cool. So, can you see your nose right now?
What?
Can you see your nose
He's
right
saying
now?
you have a very big nose.
Are you aware of your nose right now? Like if you kind of look.
Kind of.
Right? And I bet everybody in the room is kind of aware of their nose at the moment. And in fact, probably every human in history has been for most of their life kind of aware of of the presence of their nose, like there and kind of in the middle as this phantom. And that was when I put on a VR helmet for the first time. I felt that hole, something was missing in my existence. And it might be because I'm hypersensitive. It might be because I've grown up with, a slightly bigger nose. But I think that we can't talk about presence until we're talking about the presence of the nose. Have you seen anybody do that? Have you seen the phantom nose? Or are we just cut off? Is this the future?
I actually did have a demo that I modeled the head, and I had the nose on the model. And it was actually distracting because it was it was like a Pinocchio nose, and it's kind of hard to focus on. But yeah. We haven't really, we'll have to do more research in that area.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah, so there's the classic people running out of the movie theater when they saw the train coming in because they thought it was real. Is that going to happen with some elements of VR? As people get accustomed to it. I mean, there's definitely some low-hanging fruit that exists now that people can experience that you're fascinated by because it's real. I mean, like the web page room that I showed, while it was 10 minutes worth of content that day, it's not going to hold up. And so people have to become more sophisticated. I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of first moment experiences that you have. But equally, this is the weird thing. Unless you've gone to 2 places in the world, you probably actually haven't experienced presence of what we think it is. And when you cross that line, things like observation become way more interesting than they do in current headsets. There's a bunch of feeling that you get of being in those spaces where they become much more things you want to explore because they're real places you've never been before, but yet you're really there. There's a lot of exploration, there's a lot of just viewing, obviously interacting. And so I think we're gonna find out what works and what doesn't work. I mean, that's part of why we're open to experimenting on what is an experience that people are willing to pay for. What do they want to purchase on Steam? We don't know yet, and we're willing to try to take that, experiment with people to see. Now, has anyone listened to the talk John Carmack gave, I think, last week at SMU? So he talks about it at the end. And there's a point where he started seeing everything come together, where he experienced a low persistent headset that gave him presence, that he went from thinking that AR is probably going to be the mainstream accepted thing and VR would be the game-related object, to thinking that VR is going to be the mainstream large thing. I don't want to misquote him, so go see the talk. It's a good talk. It's on YouTube. But once you get to experience, so I get sick in current headsets within 10 minutes. With our headsets that have presence, which other headset makers are pushing for so that they have that same experience, I can leave that headset on for over an hour, and I have no ill effect. I don't even have eye fatigue. There's nothing. And so when you can start to be able to do that, that becomes more compelling because you control the whole experience. You're trying to make a game, and it's AR. You don't know if the people have a foot available for them because they're on the bus that moment, or if they have this whole stage where they can have a game. Like, that becomes a harder experience to control. And AR is hard, and his talk breaks down some of why AR is so insanely hard.
One of the neat things about VR is that we have to rethink all the UI elements. And so a lot of the exciting things you want to do in AR, you could still do in the virtual world, and they still apply. So we can still do research to figure out those metaphors and stuff that's going to work, so that when the technology catches up, then we can actually apply those to the real world, which is pretty neat.
And we're doing a lot of experiments, much like we did with the HMDs. We're experimenting to see what works, because the first thing everyone does is do this, right? You want to reach your hands out. I mean, that's why we have the Control VR guys over there, over our offices. When we were up visiting Cloudhead, they're doing some things with interaction. That's a real hard problem to solve, but also really rewarding, because when it feels right, it feels really right. Locomotion's the other problem. I mean, that's the minute you get out of our demo, well, the minute I did, I thought, well, the holodeck? No way. How was I moving around that giant room? Like, your body knows enough about that, and so there's just a bunch of experiments we're doing there and trying. I mean, that's definitely, the HMDs are close enough now that not to say the problem's solved, there's a bunch of other hard work there a bunch of people are going to do, but input and locomotion are probably the two most interesting things to see of what people kind of agree on. Oh, so now, wait. So if you read there's a Wired article from Brandon from Oculus talking about that. Of he had come seen the Valve demo and saw that, and that's what they're working for. So whenever their release schedule is, they're commercially available. That's why they're trying to tell people, I think, don't buy the DK2s as a commercial product. It's a developer product, because they'll get there. The cool thing the current headsets do have, though, kind of skip this and talk, is they have positional tracking, which is a huge piece of the puzzle, right? And you want to make sure that you're thinking about that now. So you really want to upgrade to the latest developer kit they have and start playing around with positional tracking. Right. You know, if you can
I think it's both. Up to this point, we've been mostly focusing on the presentation part, and there's still a large area of research for the input. And so we're hoping that once people start getting kits and start playing with this stuff, that they'll be able to contribute to that and share their ideas so we can all learn together.
Yeah, I mean, so something you'll see, especially I think as people start playing with the positional tracking headset, is what you thought would work in VR, or those experiences you thought, really aren't as interesting of the minute. Like, so with DK1, you're 7 to 10 feet away is interesting to you. You don't, things up close aren't. But as you can come up to things and look around them, and you see around their corners, like that becomes really interesting, because it has this real presence to it, of this, or real sense to it that we currently don't have. And so I think a lot of people are going to start exploring different kinds of games, different kinds of experiences where there's a blur of if it's a game or if it's an experience. Yes, in a way, because what it is I was the biggest disbeliever in the world before 6 months ago, before I moved down. I didn't think VR was interesting. I looked at it as like bump mapping or new pixel shader, something that was just going to make the presentation part more interesting for people, not that it was going to grab their lizard brain and freak them out or put them in places where they got excited over odd things of, yeah, it's going to be a hurdle, because until you experience it, it's, again, like I said, it's worthless to almost try to explain it, because it's so different. It's just, there's a bit that flips and then you get it.
I think the interesting part is that some of the best reactions we had of people coming out of the demos were the ones that are the most skeptical and the most like jaded, and then, like we've said, that a bit flips after they've had that demo, and they're like now the new, I don't know, the biggest fans.
We've experimented with that. We've done a lot of demos with it. We haven't done anything recently with it. It's a weird thing. I don't know, have you gotten to try it? It's easiest to try to say just try it. It ends up, for me, it ended up I was spending a lot of time doing things versus letting my mind be part of the experience. And that's where my interests lie, but that's not necessarily to say that's the right answer. But so I would just say try it. I mean, it's a good place for people to explore.
I have one of the melon headband things coming from Kickstarter, but they haven't shipped it yet, so I haven't been able to play with it. But the stuff I've seen, mostly it's pretty fuzzy still, and it takes a lot of training on the user's part, and you can usually identify like 5 different or classifications of things, and so I think we're still pretty far away from like direct manipulation of objects through that.
Way in the back. That's actually where we were looking at it more than having it be input. And I don't think we ever got to a place where we thought it was something we could ship or it'd become interesting. But more and more of that stuff's becoming available, and that's where it gets interesting when you give it to a lot of people, because somebody will find that one magical thing that makes it work really cool. Well, you need a headset. That would be a good start. And then you'll want to get one of the recent ones. And then really, start playing down. Unity's really quick. That's where one of the places that we always just start experimenting really quickly in, or your favorite tool, be it Unreal or Source. And then you start experimenting there, and from there grow out and see what you want to do. Steam VR becomes about the platform that you want to publish to, and kind of as multiple headsets come out, having them all work with that. But really, just start simple and start experimenting and see what works, and download other people's stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. A lot of people are sharing. People are pretty open about sharing because there's so much to learn.
What is it that current gen headsets are lacking in terms of providing the presence? Is there like a list of features you can give, or is it more like an overall presentation, or?
I don't have to repeat that.
Oh, yeah. I would refer you back to Michael Abersh's talk. He really breaks down all the numbers for that and just sort of compare it to existing stuff.
It's like an overall, just like granularity of just see the talk.
Yeah, it's a lot of different elements. It's a Steam Dev Days talk he gave in January.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
I think we're activating a lot of those systems already, just from, like we was talking earlier, having something loom over your head causes you to back up and sort of look up, and that feeds back into your brain. We experimented with some HDR stuff, and just having like your eye react to the brightness. I think there's some wiring back into your lizard brain that makes the experience feel more real to you. Oh, we had on the vestibular mismatch issue. We had an indie dev come in, and he did this little jumping game, and he had to just hooked up to a gamepad, and it felt very sickening every time you would leap because you were doing these superhuman leaps. And then I just like put some code in there to make it so that when you jumped physically, it would trigger that same thing, and it felt so much better. So I think there's a lot of things, both on the design side, that we still have to experiment with. I know someone on Reddit was talking about hooking up a fan to the DK2 and having it like programmatically turn on and off. So lots of neat little things like that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people doing location-based stuff where they're really taking that really far, right? I think the famous one is the Game of Thrones one at South by Southwest, was it last year, where they had the wind and they had you jumping, and so there's a lot of people experimenting and trying things there. I'd imagine it's going to be first a location-based stuff where they can kind of control those elements.
I guess the other thing that excites us is the standing, being able to stand up as opposed to sit down, like activates a lot more of your systems as well.
Yeah, our demo room, while we often bring people in, is because it's room scale VR, so you can actually walk around and stand and move around, and just having that little bit of movement, like that, I mean, just even that much movement, just tricks your brain into a lot of things that you lose, I think, when you're sitting down. So I know some people are in some other way that we've been talking with. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do was try to find somebody who's scared to fly and make the simulator of flying. But definitely researchers need to come back and do some more research now with current headsets. And that's something we have been talking with people about. There's some studies way back in the 90s, where people were like, oh, input latency doesn't matter because we measured it with 150 milliseconds, 250, and 350, and it never mattered. Well, because you didn't have tracking, like you didn't have a system that didn't have that latency already built in. And when you have a system that has sub 20 millisecond latency, actually input does matter. All of a sudden, when your hand's like this, you're like, ooh, right? And so there's a lot of research that I think's been done previously with VR that's going to need to be redone and keep expanding. Okay. Way up there.
Yeah, actually, so the demos we do in the room, we always have someone in there to host it and sit down and make sure you don't bang your head into the walls. And we've been looking at ways to we've been calling it auto chaperoning, and so either having models of the room or trying to figure out ways to warn the user as they get too close to the walls or whatever. Don't step on your cat, that type of thing.
The question was, how many people have thrown up in our room? This is the cool thing with presence. Out of the 2,000 or so people we've demoed to, maybe a few more. There's maybe been 5 people who didn't feel throw up-wish. They didn't feel like, oh, okay. Like they had like not even that, right? Like it wasn't anything that you've experienced now.
It was more existential weirdness that they reported.
It's more about focus of your eyes and just having a headset on. But we've had nobody come near throwing up or have any of those reactions to it. And part of that is our demos we purposely make so that you don't. I mean, even with presents, you can get people sick. Like it's like you can scare them. But the hardware is not going to be to blame anymore. So when you try your friend's game and it makes you sick, that's his fault.